HTML, JavaScript, and XML. I'm briefly going to talk about those three subjects, and those are, I don't want to say those are, but HTML is the most basic thing you need to know when you start to learn automation. Basically, you cannot really do anything without it. So the most basic knowledge in terms of automation is HTML. If you don't already know, HTML is the language of the web. That's what web pages and websites are made of. Everything you see in a browser is made of HTML. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's basically a text file with .htm or .html extension, and the text have special tags. When the browser loads the file, it knows how to format it based on the tags, which are the markups. Here's a very simple example that I just created, like took 5 minutes to do. So what you see here is basically the code of an HTML. It's a very simple HTML page. What you see says HTML, and at the bottom says HTML, so that's an opening and closing tag. All the closing tags have a slash, and there is a head section and a body section. In the head section there is a title tag, and that's basically the title of the page. When you go in a browser, on the tab itself or on the window, you see text, and that is in there. And in the body section you see a bunch of tags. You see an H1, an H3, a P, you see an input tag. All of those are just tags, and the one in between, in I would say white color, that's just text. That has nothing to do with HTML. That's basically what I wrote in. That's what's going to show up on the browser. None of the tags are going to show up on the browser. The browser knows those tags are markups. So when the browser sees an H1, it knows the text that goes in between the H1 tags is a header. So there is 6 levels of headers. There is H1 to H6, and H1 is the biggest one and H6 is the smallest one. So when the browser sees H1, it knows this is a header type 1, and it's going to display it as so. The P is a paragraph. The input is basically, there's a type, the checkbox type, radio type, and a few other ones also. But this basically, the browser sees an input, and it sees the type is checkbox, and it's going to show it as a checkbox. The last paragraph, basically the color. I just wanted to show you, style is color red. You can add a lot more styles to it. But anyways, this is a very, very basic example. And dash, and the B means bold. The BR is breaks, basically going to a new line. So if we load this HTML page in a browser, and the browser is going to display like this. Basically everything you saw here, this HTML in the browser looks like this. As you can see, the first line is H1, which is the big heading. The last one is in red. You see the checkbox, you see the radio button. All of those are based on the tag. So this is just the basics, really. This is what HTML is about. You just have to memorize what those tags are. You don't really have to memorize them because you're not going to be, creating pages. You're going to be interacting with pages, but you do need to understand it. So that's why I say HTML is pretty much the most basic thing you need to learn. It can get complicated. If you go to any of the page you're viewing, even this page you're viewing right now, if you right click it and say view source, that will open up a new tab with the source of the page, which is the HTML. There you can see there is so much going on, but do not get intimidated because the concept is the same. It's just a bunch of tags. That's all it is, and it's organized in a good way. All right, so I strongly recommend you start with HTML, and W3 schools have really good tutorial for HTML. Okay, so I advise you to go ahead and check it out. In my opinion, if you go over the tutorials on W3 schools, then you know enough for automation. But please do create at least 2 or 3 pages of your own. Just by following the tutorial, it will not stick in your brain. Okay, just create a few pages and just practice. That way you will be a lot more comfortable with it. Alright, and when you do create those pages, make sure that you use at least a couple of components like a checkbox, a form, a table. Play with those a little bit, because when you are working with Selenium, you're going to be interacting with those pages. When you're writing automated tests, you basically interact with HTML. When you're testing manually, you're interacting with the UI, the user interface, meaning you will click on a button, verify it works. But when you write code that will click on a button, then you're telling the code to go find the button element based on the HTML tag, or there's other things called IDs and classes, and you're telling the HTML to actually click on that. Alright, so the next thing is JavaScript. Do not get confused with Java. Java and JavaScript are completely different things. Other than they are both programming languages, they are not related in any way. I just want to make that clear. So JavaScript is what makes pages interactive and interesting. Most of the interactive things you see in a modern page is because of JavaScript, mostly. When you hover over something, you get information displayed. When you click on something you'll get, like, it's hard to explain, but a lot of things happen on the page. You get an alert box. You see the header rotating. You see the content of the page changing. For example, an ad. You're on one page, you never refresh, but you see the ad is changing. The page is already loaded. How is that changing? It's because of JavaScript. It's something called Ajax. Basically, the page does not need to load, but new content can be called in the background. Now, as a tester, as a beginner, it's good enough if you know what it is. I'm talking about JavaScript. I do not recommend that you learn coding JavaScript. Well, not yet, at least. Once you're comfortable with automating, then it's a knowledge you will have. I myself, I'm not too comfortable with JavaScript, but I did write some JavaScript code for my own personal projects. So my advice to you is, write a few pages in HTML, do a little bit of JavaScript tutorial, and some YouTube videos on saying what is JavaScript. Just know the basics. XML is another topic you should get briefly familiar with. It looks just like HTML, but it serves a whole different purpose. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. XML is used to move data around, to send data over the internet. It's just a carrier. It's a format of data, basically. Unlike HTML, it's not used to display data. Again, my advice is to see basic videos on what is XML on YouTube, and maybe go over a few sections of the tutorial on W3 Schools. Again, it is fairly simple, and you don't need to be the master of XML yet. So just briefly know about it, because it might come up on interviews. It will definitely come up on interviews. People would ask you if you know XML or not. So you just need to know what it is. That's all you need. So these are my recommendations of technologies to start with. The main one is HTML. HTML you do need to understand and be able to write as well. JavaScript and XML, I just want you to be aware of it. You'll be fine for now. So start working on those as soon as you can, especially HTML. Alright, let's move on.